Hey guys, I'm here with a new review, and I'm going to briefly explain why that review is not Beware the Great Ghost. I'm having some technical difficulties, I'm sorry guys, I know I'm constantly delaying those animated series reviews, but there's a problem. I switched to a new computer, and the new computer won't let me take screenshots of the DVD. When I use its DVD player, it's a Toshiba, so when I use the Toshiba DVD player, it doesn't let me use print screen on the screen while it's working. For example, on my older computer, that's how I did it before. How I got the screenshots, I used print screen, then I pasted it onto Paint, and then I saved it, and then edited it all together. The new computer won't let me do that when the DVD player is working, and I've even tried some screenshot programs from the internet, and all that comes out is a giant black screen. So I guess the Toshiba DVD player is screenshot proof. But I'm still figuring that out to see if there's no other way on this computer. If worst comes to worst, I'll just go back to my older computer and do it and get the screenshots like I did before. The problem is part of the reason I got a new computer was because the old one was being super glitchy and slow and breaking down all the time. It was becoming a huge pain to use. But if that's what I gotta do to keep up those reviews, I'll do it. And the reason I'm doing this review is I've decided to do a better version of this review, because I've already done a video on Sins Past, but I'm not gonna lie, I've seen my older reviews and I know that they're bad. I've seen the comments, I've gone back and listened to the actual videos numerous times, and I thought, I could go back and I could make a really good version of this, or at least I could do it a lot better than I did now, and so I really wanted to go back and do that. And Sins Past is a book that's very interesting to talk about. I still have a lot to say about it, so that's part of the reason why I decided to do this one first. I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm not going to go into any particular order of these re-reviews. Just whichever one I find most interesting at the time, I'll redo that video. I'll do re-reviews whenever I'm not able to do the Batman animated series reviews, or whenever I need a change of pace and wanted to do something different, a different kind of review. I'd do a re-review. And so if I were to do another one, the next one I would want to do is probably Batman the Cult, because that was one of my older videos, and it's an interesting book with a lot of things I could go in depth about. So yeah, that's why I'm doing Sins Past right now. So let's get started right away. Sins Past was one of the most controversial and dogged-on Spider-Man storylines until the end of One More Day. Like One More Day, there was an editorial mandate behind this story. JMS had come up with an initial concept to have Gwen Stacy's children come back and haunt Peter Parker, but that Peter himself was going to be the father. Excuse me. Unfortunately, Marvel decided that this would make Peter seem way too old, and they opted for Norman Osborn, Spider-Man's nemesis, to be the father of the children. As dumb as this decision was, I do understand it a little. If you wanted the kids to be the antagonists, that would be harder to pull off if they were Peter's children, unless Norman did some deceiving and found the kids and raised them as his own. The fact that Marvel thought that Spider-Man having children made him too old proves that Marvel doesn't like adult Peter Parker. Until the past decade or so, Spider-Man has been a character that was constantly evolving and maturing, going from high school to college to marriage. Now, though, he has stopped growing, but what's worse is that he has regressed to something more like his college years thanks to One More Day. Don't get me wrong, there are many Spider-Man stories I like that take place during his college years, including the death of Gwen Stacy, but the worst thing you can have for a character is for them to go backwards and forget the lessons that they've learned. This is why I think people had a problem with the New 52 Batgirl. To quickly go off topic with that book, it would bother me a lot more as well, but I still think interesting character stories are being told by Gail Simone in Batgirl, and Barbara Gordon is still a character I like and root for. Going back to Spider-Man, the regression of his evolution was given spark in Sins Past and exacerbated at the end of JMS's run. Still, that in itself is not the worst crime this book commits, because Peter is still written like a mature character here, and despite the bad story, still stays in character throughout the entire book. I fully believe that Peter would act this way if all the things in this book happened. The problem is I don't think what happened in this book should have happened. Getting into some synopsis, the story centers around Peter and his family being attacked by two strangers who are revealed to be the children of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. There had to be a contrivance for the kids to be adults, and this makes the story come off to me as not the right time in Peter's life to tell. While the story acknowledges that it's only been a few years since the death of Gwen Stacy, it's been decades in terms of publishing history, and the story relies too much on that feeling to suspend the audience's disbelief on the children of Gwen being around as old as Peter himself. The contrivance they use is that Norman's blood has the goblin serum in it, and so it brings with it an advanced healing factor. So this causes the kids to age very rapidly every year. I don't know, it seems to me that in every other Marvel comic, a healing factor prolongs the lifespan, like for Wolverine and the Hulk. Regardless, their motivation for wanting to destroy both Peter Parker and Spider-Man doesn't make complete sense. Norman raises them in his evil ways, but he lies to them, saying that their mother, who the kids know it's Gwen, was murdered by Spider-Man. I've neglected to mention that their names are Gabriel and Sarah. Anyway, they both went through the effort of researching everything about Peter Parker, who they at first think is their real father because that's what Norman told them. Wouldn't they ever bother to look up anything on their mother? I'm pretty sure that if they looked back at some old articles of the Daily Bugle, they'd see that Gwen was murdered by the Green Goblin and not Spider-Man. You might argue that the people in New York are killed all the time by supervillains, but that doesn't make much sense either. After all, J. Jonah Jameson actually knew Gwen, and so I'm sure he would have printed something. Also, there was another Green Goblin story that came out a few years earlier in the Spectacular Spider-Man book called Death in the Family, where there was news footage of the death of Gwen Stacy. So, getting back to point, if Gabriel and Sarah found out that Peter is Spider-Man, they should have been able to find out that Gwen was killed by the Green Goblin and that Norman lied to them. Speaking of Gabriel, I didn't like him at all here. Sure, I get it, we're not supposed to like him, but I almost don't even sympathize with him. He just comes off like a psycho that won't listen to reason, which is something that I suppose he got from his father, but then it's convenient that Sarah turns out sane like her mother, and even happens to look almost exactly like her. Even if Gabriel was a psycho, at least I found Harry Osborn, who can turn psychotic, to be a well-rounded and compelling character. Gabriel just comes off as two-dimensional. At the end, Sarah is shot and taken to the hospital where she is dying because Norman's blood in her veins won't accept any other blood. It's a bit too overt what this is trying to convey, which is Norman would let his daughter die before anyone else helping her, which might not have felt laid on as too thick, but Peter actually says this very thing in caption boxes. To be fair, I do like the kind of energy that this scene has, where Sarah is saved with Peter's blood, while at the same time Gabriel is taking the Goblin Serum. It felt cinematic, and JMS pulled off that vibe very well. After the blood transfusion, Spider-Man is left helpless against Gabriel, who has now turned into the Grey Goblin, but Sarah turns against her brother and takes him down, and that's pretty much the end of the book. Now, after all this, I've got into neither my biggest praise nor biggest criticism with this book. The worst thing about Sins Past is that it completely goes against Gwen Stacy's character, and I would go as far as to call it a big disrespect towards the character. Now, I don't think it was anyone at Marvel's intention to disrespect Gwen, but it shows that when Marvel had Norman be the father of Gwen's children, they didn't think it through. Before I had read Sins Past and someone told me that Gwen would cheat on Peter, I probably would have laughed, but that's exactly what happens here. For a reason I can't fathom, she chose to sleep with Norman. In here, Gwen goes on about how she was attracted to Norman's dark side, but would that seriously be enough to go all the way when she is still clearly in love with Peter? Sure, in her letter to Peter, she sounded like she was very remorseful for what happened, but the fact that she chose to do it at all, and it even implies that Norman may have been her first, makes her pretty unsympathetic in my book and should taint Peter's memory of her, which kind of does happen, but at the end Peter still says he loves her. Now, even though I say this, what happened in Sins Past doesn't taint my view on Gwen as of her whole comic book history. The original issue where she dies, Amazing Spider-Man number 121, is still probably one of the best comics I've ever read. That was the first clear marker of a hero failing in such an integral way, and a great subversion of the standard girlfriend being kidnapped plot. I felt bad for Peter, but I also felt and still feel bad for Gwen. It still confounds me that Gwen would be Peter's first true love and also one time cheats on him. That doesn't feel like it matches up from the perspective of just the way people behave, and it is something that Gwen would never do. The only solution I could come up to remedy this is if Norman has to be the father, is to have him artificially inseminate her without her knowledge, which sounds implausible, but at least wouldn't mess with Gwen's character. Mysterio did something similar in Kevin Smith's Daredevil run, where he had a girl kidnapped and artificially inseminated while she was unconscious so they could make her believe her pregnancy was divine. It also annoys me that Marvel had to force all these new plot points into the original 121, and after reading it again, I can tell you they don't match up at all. Not even close. Dialogue was added, and Gwen was made to be more nervous and bent out of shape for having to keep the secret from Peter. In the original issue, it really feels like Gwen didn't have anything she had to hide. There are parts in 121 where we're in Gwen's thoughts and Norman's. She would assume after reading Sins Past that the fate of the kids would be at the top of their mind, since they have an argument about it in a scene that takes place at the beginning of issue 121. You might wonder why I'm bothering to complain about that, since it's obvious that the original creators never had in mind that Gwen had children, but the fact that the new creators had to force it in proves that they just shouldn't have tried it. It just reeks of bad retcon 101. The only thing with the whole Gwen having children idea that I thought truly worked was when Sarah is shot on the top of the same bridge Gwen died and falls like her mother did, but now Spider-Man has the chance to make it right by saving Gwen's daughter. However, this is still not my biggest praise for the book. My absolute favorite thing about Sins Past is Mary Jane, which is how the book begins, actually. Every time MJ is on the page, I like her so much because of how well JMS writes her and how real JMS writes her. She has many cute exchanges with Peter throughout the book, and I can feel why Peter loves her. MJ shows that she's useful and not a nagging wife like how she became towards the later part of the 90s. After Peter is weakened by the blood transfusion he gave Sarah, MJ tells him that she's been keeping an eye out to protect his secret identity. She comically tells Peter about a nurse who was trying to get a picture of him. She says, "Big feet, food cart, clumsy me, oopsie." I'm really glad Mary Jane is this likable and helpful throughout the entire book, despite all the poor retconning going on. I can also say that I still thought she was sympathetic, even after learning she had kept the fact that Gwen had Norman's children a secret from Peter for years. Mary Jane didn't want to taint Peter's memory of Gwen, and Peter would probably make the same choice for someone else. It surprised me that that worked as well as it did. Peter also acknowledges that Mary Jane doesn't take it personally how much Peter is thinking about Gwen. This is MJ and Peter having a mature and working relationship, and boy do I think that's been lacking in many places throughout the various interpretations of their relationship, though I think the biggest culprit of this has been the Raimi movies. No offense to the people that like those movies, I thought plenty of things were well done in that series, but I don't count Peter-Mary Jane's relationship as one of them. Sins Past is darker in tone than much of your average Spider-Man comics, but another plus I give this book is the small amount of humor JMS is able to squeeze in here and there, like when Spider-Man curses numerous times on a piece of archival news footage. What I've really neglected to talk about in this review is the artwork by Mike Deodato Jr. I have to say, I like the artwork a lot on the whole. Deodato draws a slightly bulkier Spider-Man than I'm used to, so I'm impressed that it was drawn in a way that didn't bother me. Like Romita Jr., Deodato Jr. Handles the action sequences very well, and was a good replacement in that respect. I noticed that the way characters were drawn was a little inconsistent here and there, but it made the art more stylized. I've read a lot of the rest of the issues Deodato Jr. worked on Amazing Spider-Man, and his art got more consistent and more defined later on. There are a few other positives I could mention, such as Spider-Man's relationship with Detective Lamont, but it would be rather moot because my final verdict is that you should pass on this book. I can't deny that this book had some interesting concepts and good characterizations, but that doesn't change how poorly handled Gwen's character was and the plot holes along with Gabriel's motivations. From what I've read, JMS, after all was said and done, wanted to take the Stacy twins out of continuity at the end of his run, and Marvel wouldn't even let him do that. As it stands, we know Gabriel is still around after one more day because of the American Sun storyline during the Dark Reign period. I want to stress that Sins Past has some elements in it that are genuinely good, and it's clear that JMS wrote it to the best of his ability and didn't phone it in. The fact that the story is bad no matter how hard he tried to write it is a waste of his writing talents, to be honest. Still, while I'm saying that this is best skipped, I strongly recommend the first two Ultimate collections of JMS's run, which are an absolute blast to read. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say on Sins Past. It's pretty skippable, besides a few strong characterizations here and there. And it's kind of interesting how this whole like kind of dark period of Spider-Man started. Not dark as in dark in tone, but just like the regression in Spider-Man's continuity. It's kind of depressing, but nothing can take away how much I enjoy Spider-Man. Not even one more day. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to this, and I'll catch you next time, hopefully with that review of Beware the Grey Ghost. See you around.